Welcome everybody. This is going to be the last main stage show that we're doing here for Fallout for Hope. $15,783.75 raised for the American Heart Association this last week, which is just absolutely insane. That's 157 trees that the AHA will be putting in inner cities. This is still going through tomorrow, but tonight we have a little bit of a surprise. An incredibly special guest, someone that we've always wanted to geek out with and have never had a chance to, is here. Nate Purkeypile. And with me as always is Mr. Robots.
Mr. Robots.
Mr. Robots.
Mr. Robots to you. Everyone else is just
Tom.
Yeah, this is exciting. So this is going to go up as an episode of the Fallout Hub / Fallout Lorecast.
Yes, sir.
This will be up on other feeds. So if you don't catch the whole thing, you can check it out in both those locations. Nate, we are super excited to have you. This is awesome. This is awesome for us. We are big fans of your work. What was it? A few weeks ago, you shared a whole bunch of your stuff online on Twitter, and man, like awesome stuff. Can you share a little bit about that? Real quick, we're going to do a little intro thing. We're going to do the Robots Dozen warm-up questions, and then we're going to get to the official interview stuff. But just so if people don't know who you are, can you just give them a little elevator pitch about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. I've been in the games industry about 17 years, but the last 14 of those years were all at Bethesda. So I've been there was there a long time, and was the lead artist on Fallout 76 as the last big thing.
Yeah, and you've done a ton of work. A lot of the stuff that we play in that game and a lot of these other games that we absolutely love are in some ways your brain children, I guess we should say, or you worked or had a hand in it in some ways, working with some of the other artists, or your own concoctions, your own designs and things like that. So we're big fans of your work. But as we normally do when we have a guest on the Fallout Hub, we like to open this up with the Robots Dozen questions. These are just some warm-up questions. These are off-the-wall bonkers questions that you can just answer however you want. Don't overthink them. Just spit out the first thing that comes to mind. And we're just going to move from one question to the next. We'll get through these relatively quickly. And don't worry, because we will absolutely judge you based on your answer. So here we go.
Perfect.
Perfect. Question number one. None of these are Freudian in any way. So this is probably the longest question in the group. One day you're out walking when a crazy looking old man approaches you and says, "It's you. I was meant to give you this. Use it wisely," and hands you a dollar bill from the year of your birth with your mother's name written on it in ink. He disappears before you can ask more. What do you do?
Go spend it.
What? Okay, on what? What do you buy with it?
Chips.
Chips. That is the correct answer. Congratulations.
The correct answer is always chips.
The correct answer is chips. When in doubt, buy a bag of chips. That's what I always say. Question 2. What is the sum of orange and rectangle?
An orange rectangle.
That's a valid answer.
Correct. Yes, a valid answer. All right, question number 3. Which of us, between me and Ken, seems most likely to know how to tap dance?
I go with you.
Me? I'm the tap dancer of the group.
Yep.
Congratulations.
You've been known to lay down a few.
I can do some jazz steps. That is absolutely true. Question number 4. What creature in Fallout would you ride like a horse?
Snallygaster.
Yes,
that would be
funny. The Snallygaster. Yes,
be a wild ride.
Every time you get one right, I'm doing a woohoo. All right, that's it would be a very gross, probably stinky ride, but
for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think he brushes those teeth.
Yeah, and I don't know how you put a saddle on there without accidentally covering up one of those weird eyes that's just kind of like all over its back, and it makes me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. All right, the question number 5. Where do you go where everybody knows your name?
Like the Cheers bar.
All right, there you go.
Hey.
The Cheers bar. Congratulations.
I was sad when that closed in Boston.
Oh, I didn't realize it closed.
Yeah, it's gone now because of COVID. Yeah, it's permanently closed.
Bummer.
Freaking COVID. Killing all our childhood memories. Okay, number 6. If you were a dog, would you wear a sweater?
Nah.
No?
No. Yeah, fur.
What do you need a sweater for?
Yeah.
All right. So here's another question. Our friend Dave, who does the Fallout Hub with us as well, and he will potentially be joining us later, or maybe after I leave because I have to go do another show. But if Dave gives you a haunted doll and tells you to put it somewhere safe that nobody will ever find it, but it will not be harmed, where do you put it?
It won't be harmed, or I won't be harmed.
It won't be harmed.
I mean, it's a haunted doll. I've watched Supernatural. I'm going to burn it.
That's what you got to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. You do not follow the instructions and you burn it right away. Very good.
Right.
Put some salt on it and burn it. Yes. Perfect. Question number 8. How many super mutants does it take to screw in a light bulb?
I think they can. Maybe one of the smart ones, but most of them, like, you'd just be infesting the whole place with super mutants then.
No amount is good enough to screw in a light bulb. You are correct. All right, number 9. Who is the most talented person you know that isn't famous?
Just got to think of this one.
A real stumper.
Yeah, maybe Ilya Nazaroff. He's a concept artist at Bethesda.
Okay.
He has done tons of stuff, and he's also super fast.
Is there something specific he's done that we would have recognized? I know this is just kind of off the cuff. You're probably going, okay, what things did he work on? But
Yes.
a ton. The cat paintings, he did those, so you might recognize this kitty from the cat paintings.
Yeah,
that cat looks really irritated to be held up to the camera.
Like, son of a
that death stare.
Yeah, put me back in the lab.
We're almost done. Question 10. You're a movie director choosing music for an ironic romance scene. You must choose a song that clashes with the mood of the scene. What do you choose?
Death metal.
Is there a specific song that you would pick?
Some Cannibal Corpse, maybe.
Nice. That'll work.
Yeah. While they're like, ooh, baby, baby. Glug, 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 glug. Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Question number 11. You discover irrefutable evidence that you are a synth with the memories and personality of Danny DeVito. Danny DeVito is still very much alive. Do you murder him and take his place?
No, I just go star in other shows. See if anyone notices.
Do you go by the same name?
He starts
Number 2.
Danny DeVito
Danny
2.
DeVito 2.
The sequel. Oh man. Too bad Dave wasn't here for that question. All right, number 12. Why not 2 thumbs?
Yeah, why not? Let's do it. I saw a robot second thumb thing, actually, that attaches to your hand, so seems cool. Seemed very useful.
You got a perfect score. Congratulations. And unbeknownst to many of our guests, this Robots Dozen also counts as a goat. And so we have determined that your let's see, hold on. I gotta put this into the system.
Crunch those numbers.
Okay. Crunch these numbers. Okay. We've determined that your perfect job is a fruit vendor. Congratulations.
Sounds fun.
It's respectable work in the apocalypse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll be serving up.
Demand a high price.
So here's the question, though: is a potato a fruit?
Isn't it a vegetable?
Is it a vegetable? Okay, so isn't it like a combination of potatoes and tomatoes together, right? Right. Okay. So, but tomatoes are technically fruit that we treat like vegetables, and potatoes are like roots.
Yeah, root vegetables. So it's a vegetable.
It's a vegetable. Okay, so you're a tato vendor. There you go. I like it. Very cool.
Well,
congratulations. That was awesome.
Before we hop in here, I did want to remind everybody, if you hit the hashtag Purkey, that's turkey but with a P, Shia, who's
definitely never heard that.
I apologize, but it's the easiest way to get people to spell it correctly. Yep, there you go. Shia, who's in chat, who said to say hello to you, she is going to be giving away 2 ink drawings tonight, so make sure to enter that. So hashtag Purkey. I'm going to do a drawing here at the end of the interview.
I love Shia's work. I've been combing Shia's work. One of the goals that we had set on the Fallout Lorecast Patreon was to hit regularly more than $500 a month, which we've done for a few months. In order, and if we pass that goal, I would get a tattoo. So I want to get like a Fallout tattoo, and I've been combing through Shia's work to figure out if there's any of those that I could put on my shoulder and make it look really cool. So I love Shia's work. Awesome stuff. So go get yourself one of those pieces of work. There's like Modus, and what was the other one?
Modus, and then some of the Scorched.
Yeah.
Crystals and all.
Awesome stuff. I love Shia style. Very, very cool.
Yeah, Shia stuff is great.
Well, guys, I have to head out. I've got another show I've got to launch. I wish I could stay. But we've got Cyberpunk Lorecast and Mass Effect Lorecast Patreon episodes tonight that'll be done on my channel. But you guys stay here, listen to what Nate has to say. He's got awesome stuff, and I'm going to definitely be listening to this later as well. But thank you for being here, Nate, and Ken, for setting this up. I'll see you guys later.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's good talking to you.
Yep. Yeah.
Let me turn. There we go. Right. And then there were 2. You started making video games back in 3rd grade, I'd read. What was that first game? You remember?
I don't know if I even remember the specific one, but I know I made like tons of these just like terrible text adventures on old Apple II computers.
Oh, yeah.
Lost to time, probably, thankfully.
Yeah, I fondly remember I made a Doctor Who role-playing game on my T83 calculator in algebra class.
Yeah, my teachers didn't like me doing that also, because I would do the same thing on the calculator.
Yeah, math was not my forte. What games were you playing back then? What did you really start with?
I mean, back then I was mostly playing like Nintendo games, so I always like go rent different games from the video store and play all kinds of stuff.
What so you started playing games, you really started enjoying them. When did you make the decision that this is something I want to do for a lifetime?
Great. So it was at the same time I was like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm just going to keep doing this, and I just never changed my mind. You know, some people are like, I want to be a fireman, but not me.
Did back then when you had that vision in your head, were there any gamers or developers, people in the industry that you looked to back then you thought, you know what, I could be that person? I'm trying to think of who the celebrities would even be for that period that would be.
I don't think that was really a thing for me until like the Doom era. id Software and everyone there, like Carmack and Romero, like I really looked up to them and loved those games.
Yeah.
But before then, I don't think I even really knew who was making the games, because you would just get like Nintendo Power every once in a while and didn't have that kind of exposure to who was doing it.
Yeah, back then it was more about there was more of a focus on the end product than really the people behind the scenes. But I think then again, we've come so far in terms of artistry and what you could do now versus like the original Super Mario Brothers game.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you'd went on to do art and game design in college. How did you find the right college to go to for that?
So initially I went to a different one, actually. I went to the Academy of Art for about a year. But, you know, I always wanted to do games, but they were really fine arts focused. So eventually I left that. I spent about a year just working on Half-Life mods instead. And then I applied to Digipen because they're basically focused just on games. And that ended up being a great choice. And I'm really glad I went there.
It was you were the project leader on Desert Crisis, which was a mod for Half-Life. How did you get involved in that project? Did you play a lot of Half-Life and it just kind of organically happened?
Yeah, that's pretty much why I got Half-Life in the first place. Is like, first off, it was an awesome game, but I also wanted to make a mod for it. So I started this project with a few friends from school, and then slowly found other people on the internet and grew from there and worked on it for years.
What do you ever still go back and play it?
Every once in a while, yeah. There's like events that show up now and again on Steam where there's a whole group that still plays it every once in a while. And it's a lot of fun.
That's going to be a little weird to go back to stuff that you did so long ago. Is it a little nostalgic, or do you get in your head and think, I could have done this a little different knowing what I know now?
I think it's mostly nostalgic. Like, I know I could probably do it better now and all that, but it was a really fun game to work on, and I still enjoy the combat of it because you're like jumping off of walls and throwing sledgehammers at people and stuff like that.
Yeah. So then, so games that you worked on even before Bethesda. So you worked on Blood Rain 2, Eon Flux, which I used to watch at the wee hours of the morning. That cartoon was on. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. What do you remember most about those early games that you did? And what did you do for them?
So for all of those, I did world art and lighting because that's always been my focus. But I think the thing I remember the most was Terminal Reality was this studio full of super talented people, but it did a lot of crunch and stuff like that. So everyone ended up leaving. But from that studio, if you go to any major studio now, there's always someone from Terminal Reality. Naughty Dog, Valve, they're all over the place. So it was like this incubator. So that was really cool. And Metroid Prime was very, very different from that because Nintendo games, everything is very like specifically crafted. I would get like a whole month just for one room, which is like the complete opposite of Bethesda games. Like you would be modeling every single rock and every crack by hand. So I learned a lot about how to make really good looking, interesting spaces, but also learned that I think that's a terrible way to make a game because it takes forever.
Right.
Like, I think there's like a middle ground there. It's like you can do a lot of custom stuff, but maybe not every rock. That's maybe a little too far.
How do you approach level design and animation then or even now with the games that you've worked on?
I think I usually just try and think of myself as the player and what I would enjoy and what's convenient. Like one example I would go to is like Diamond City. All the shops are just like dead center in a circle, and you don't have to load for all of them except for one. So, because I knew players would go there all the time, and I didn't want to be like, load, come out, let me run to this other side of the city, like, because I knew that would just annoy me. So I was like, let's put them all right there. We're gonna do it like hundreds of times.
Yeah,
so that's the main thing I think of.
Yeah, that particular space feels like such a good centralized hub. And even layout wise, the way in which you've got streets and alleys and you get a verticality to it, as well as when you're wandering down in there, the space feels so much bigger than it really is. In the same way that maybe Megaton back in Fallout 3 had that kind of verticality where you're making your way around, but you obviously had a lot more to work with in Fallout 4 versus 3 in terms of what you could build out in a space like that.
Yeah, we were able to do a lot more with that. Spent even more time on that than any of the other cities I've worked on. So spent a lot of time thinking, if I was living in this baseball stadium, like, would I build it? Kind of built out from it for like, where's the food? Where do they put their trash? Stuff like that.
Where's the bar?
Exactly. That's super important.
Did you you did a lot of scouting for Fallout 76, but when you were doing that space, working on Diamond City, did you do a lot of scouting in Boston in the same way that you did throughout West Virginia?
Yeah, ended up going on multiple trips there and went on like the tour of Fenway Park and stuff like that. Thousands of pictures probably over the course of years because it's not that far away, so it would kind of make excuses to go to Boston and then not let our friends in to why we're taking so many pictures.
Are you guys thinking of moving there? Yeah, sure. Investing in real estate?
Like this. Why are you taking pictures of the floor? That's kind of weird. Don't worry about it.
I'm getting into architecture. It's fine. Leave me alone. Where do you find inspiration? So much of what you do, and what I think is really memorable about the spaces you've created, is they have such a strong presence or atmosphere that you feel when you're going into a room, or Diamond City, or Little Lamplight, or the Deep in Fallout 76. Those spaces have such atmosphere. Where do you find inspiration when you design stuff like that?
A lot of it is from like travel. Like there's sort of a connection there with a lot of those spaces, and scuba diving, which I've done a lot of, because they're almost like, especially like Blackreach and Little Lamplight, like all these sort of glowy, sort of ethereal feeling spaces. So that was something that was always really inspiring. Or just going to other places, and then there's always other games, movies. It just depends on what it is, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely got the feel when I wandered into the deep for the first time. I was like, am I in Elder Scrolls all of a sudden?
Yeah, I did that one for fun on the side, and everybody liked it enough that we ended up making it part of the main quest.
That entire space was such a cool feature. There are parts of the map, like even got the cave system whose name escapes me now. That's the tourist attraction in 76.
Uncanny Caverns?
Yes, that's the one. That is such a space that's so well designed too. But unless you have a reason to go there, it's kind of one of those places that if it's not part of a quest or a daily, you kind of go there once and then you forget to go back. But it's laid out so cool. Like that entire cave system is just amazing. Even with like the little boxes you can learn as you're going through.
Yeah, I like that. That was a really good touch in that space.
Here's Dave.
Hello.
Hey,
How's everybody doing? Good to see everybody.
Good, Dave.
Nate, how are you? Thank you for coming on.
no problem.
Even though I didn't invite you. I was invited to this. I don't know why I'm saying thank you. Just, it's like we're at the dinner party together and we just happened to be there. And I thanked you for coming over to another person's dinner party. It's kind of what I just did. So I'm trying to make it less awkward.
Double down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you have? Do you have a consistent style in terms of the way that you design, like a particular aesthetic that maybe is consistent to your work?
I think I do sort of stuff that is, I'm aiming in the realistic category, but also with like those weird touches, so it looks real, but it's also absurd, like the giant mushrooms and Blackreach and stuff like that. I like those really extreme touches. Like the crashed space station's another one. I always wanted that in Fallout, but it kept on being like, no, we don't have time. No, we don't have time. Well, I'm just going to make it. So I have time. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I feel like there's not enough. Sometimes I feel like there's not enough whimsy, and maybe not like post-apocalyptic whimsy, I suppose. That it's like something that's like really out there, like is always really fun to see,
And like I think that's a hallmark of the Fallout universe. It's so absurd in different ways, and whimsical in the way that when you think of like 1950s sci-fi into the early 1960s, it's all very ridiculous. It's robots and flying cars and, mutated floating brains. And we've had the total gambit of that throughout the years in Fallout.
And that's why I like that franchise, is because you can do all those things within that. So even though it's like, usually an IP is kind of narrow sometimes, but in this one, it's like, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you get time travel, whatever.
And it's like, if you think about like Mad Max, like the movies or something like that, there's 4 movies. And what's the one location that you remember, if you could name one? It's going to be the Thunderdome, because 2 go out, 1 go in. Or 2 go in, 1 go out. That's what I mean. Like there's not it's like a desert land where there's not a lot of different locations, and it's like even trying to remember names of I mean, especially from like the ones in the 80s and 90s, it's like those, it's like it's not very memorable, but like a good, well designed location like the Thunderdome, I mean, you remember that. You remember when they have like the the big guy and the little guy fighting each other,
Yeah, it's a classic one. And I have a little story about the Thunderdome, actually, that I think most people probably don't know about this one. But before I was art lead on 76, I fought the previous art lead in a Thunderdome. So we went to Burning Man together, and they have a Thunderdome there with the bungees and everything, and you're swinging around and everyone's up on the cage. It was amazing.
Only one of us will emerge.
It's like, I get to cross this off my bucket list.
I just had a vision that, like, you become lead artist at Bethesda by a death match, and just like in the middle of the atrium.
That's how it works.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's like great business. I mean, look at upward mobility and career movement. I mean, the field is open for people if that's the case, you know.
You literally fight your way to the top.
And I mean, then you get to take out some of your frustration, you know. If I could go fight my boss in the Thunderdome and then take over his job, you know, that would be ideal. I would do that.
Yeah, less arguments that way.
I did fight
that.
I did fight my boss once in one of those inflatable sumo costumes. It was for a holiday party. I actually felt pretty good.
Let's try that.
I felt pretty good by the time I was done. It was a good way to let stress out. Speaking of colleagues, so many of them on LinkedIn, I was being a total creeper before the interview. I was flipping back through your LinkedIn profile. And a lot of them said a lot of similar things about you in that you achieve a lot of quality and polish with your work under very strict timelines, sometimes even less than time that you need, as well as your drive. What drives you in this industry, or what drives you to create? Where does that come from?
I think it's just that I've always really liked games, so I'm doing everything I can to make those games and put as much stuff in as you can without spending too much time on it. Not to say like don't polish stuff, but like the thing about Bethesda games in particular, it's like you could spend literally forever on a game like that. You just kind of have to find what's the right spot for like how much time to get it looking as good as possible before moving on to something else. And coffee. And hotkeys. So that's the secret.
Yeah. Do you have one of those mouses at work that have like, you know, the 24 different mouse buttons on the side, and you're like, all right, this one, if I press, you know, this button, it's Alt and F8.
Yes, everything macroed.
If I want to move, if I want to select a different cursor, it's that. I have one of those too. I have like I have a gaming mouse for like my programming job.
Yeah. I had one of those like the rat mouse that looks like something out of like a cyberpunk.
Did you have
Those
one at one
cool.
point with the big weird round red ball that had like remember when that was a thing? It was like a chonky mouse, but it had this big red ball on the side.
I don't know if I saw that one.
That was just me. How did you get the nickname The Phoenix?
So that was from back in my Wild Tangent days when I was the intern, and every week there they would have this poker game after work. So my kind of thing in poker was that I would just do terribly at first and just almost lose, but then come back and like do really well. Like every time. I was the Phoenix then, coming back from my ashes of terrible poker play.
Nate's a ringer confirmed. You have a really interesting mix when it comes to skill sets. So you have that technical background in terms of modeling and animation, as well as you approach the games from the player perspective, meaning that as you're creating, like you said, you think in terms of, if I was playing this, what would I want, or what would people look for? And when it comes to world design too, you bring this artistry together. How has that really helped you in your career to have that kind of skill set?
I think it's helped me to like talk to other departments a lot more, because some people like just focus on art and make that their specialty, but I've always been sort of this cross-discipline person. Like I didn't even actually really do art period until like 1999, because before then I was only programming and designing games. So that ended up being super helpful for putting in new tools and like redesigning the lighting system on 76 and stuff like that, or even writing my own tools. Like that's been super helpful to get stuff done faster.
Writing your own tools.
Yeah, I'm sure they're like, the code is terrible, but it gets the job done. Like there's a lot of making games that is just like repetitive nonsense. So you can easily script stuff up and write stuff in like Max script and stuff like that to do it for you.
Oh, that's awesome. What?
Like go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say on Fallout 3, like we had to do these edge trims for decals on everything, because everything is ruined, but we had to do that by hand at first. So I wrote something to do it for us, and like that probably saved me 5 years on that game. I don't know how we would have done it without it.
Well, that's I remember you were talking too about the lighting system in Fallout 76, how you worked on creating more dynamic lighting system, a new lighting system that I remember particularly when we were looking at Wastelanders at Bethesda Game Days, and got a chance to actually sit down and play it properly. The very first thing that struck me was how how different the world looked and how much the lighting was more dynamic and the world just looked more beautiful. But in Fallout 3, you had to light things by hand.
Yeah,
Which
it wasn't until 76 that stuff would bounce light for you. So every single like little pocket of darkness and light, if you like have sunlight coming into a room, right, you would have to then put all these extra lights to fill that room with light yourself. So that was like thousands and thousands of lights versus one.
Was there, and you had to do that by hand. There was no way to script that really because it had to be really done by the eye. God, that.
Yeah, the way I would do it is I would turn off all the lights and just kind of like do it by feel. So I can't even see the lights, and you're just like duplicating them and adjusting their brightness, making all these little lights spilling through doorways. If you watch talks, they're like, don't do it this way.
I imagine it's like rearranging your living room, and you're like, all right, put the couch over here. All right, now, I know I want the armchair in the corner, but so let me put it there and let me see how that looks. Okay, and then 4 hours later, you're like, okay, I think I like this, and the next day you're like, no, this looks like crap. Change everything.
And then you have to adjust all of those again by hand.
Yeah, because it's like you move one light and then you have to move this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a ton.
What was your first Fallout? What got you into the Fallout franchise?
Well, hopefully this gets me some cred, but it was the first one. I played the first one like way back in the day. And probably not like right when it came about.
One credit.
Just one.
You're gonna receive a special award. We're gonna ship it to you right now. It's coming in the mail.
I'll expect it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's I wish I'd had the opportunity. I got into gaming later. We had a Nintendo, but not a PC. I mean, by the time I did, it was Doom and Quake, but I never got a chance to really play and appreciate Fallout 1 and 2. Fallout 3 was my first game. Yeah, it must have been
interesting.
That was playing those early games. What drew you into that world? Was it just the wackiness of it, or just the post-apocalyptic feel?
It's both. Like I've always liked that blend because I like how it's dark and serious, but then also just so goofy at the same time. And that was really enjoyable to me. And it was always like this formative game for me. And I ended up doing like my junior and senior projects in high school, both on nuclear weapons, which they probably thought was kind of weird.
What? That's what, like, how you would theoretically build one, or like what kind of experiments are we talking about here, Nate?
So one was on like the history of nuclear weapons, and the other was purely on the physics of just like how the blasts work and radiation and all these things.
Did you do a scale model of the school and be like, well, this is what would happen if?
I'm sure they would have not liked that.
No.
So in West Virginia, they have this thing called the Social Studies Fair, which is like it's like for like middle schoolers and high schoolers will go and they'll present a project of something from social studies. But after Fallout 76 released, it was like predominantly kids doing Mothman and Flatwoods Monster because everybody was talking about them again. And normally, like every year, you get like one or two people doing that, but that next year it was like everybody. It was like, this is the it thing, Mothman and Flatwoods Monster, and everybody was like going crazy over it. It was funny to see the pictures from the different displays because it's by county, and so it's like pretty much every kid will participate in it. A lot of them did that right after Fallout 76. So
that's so cool.
To inspire more people to do fun little projects like that.
That's so cool. Cryptids are the best.
Yeah.
You are talking to the cryptid master over here.
Had a few people send. Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
Dave. Did you show him your degree?
I have a little bit of a delay on my end. I'm sorry.
Oh, Dave literally has a cryptozoology degree.
So, Nate, I'm a West Virginia native. I'm from Charleston. Grew up in Bluefield, which Bramwell is in the game. And I know it's in the game because there's a terminal entry that talks about Bramwell, but it's never mentioned locations. And I knew it even when watching the trailers.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the Mega Mansions
right now, but I got a degree from the Mega Mansions. Yeah, I got a degree from it's from the UK. It's called the University of Paranormal Studies. I paid $50 and took an exam, and I have a certificate for a degree in cryptozoology. You had to take a little exam, and you had to a lot of it. Now the thing is, there was no questions about Mothman or Flatwoods Monster, the Grafton Monster, whatever. It was primarily like, what's a mermaid? What's a kelpie? What's the Loch Ness Monster? So it was very UK based. So I'm not sure if I have an international degree, but I have it's all semantics at this point. But
So like if monsters invade, you should go to the UK to fight monsters. Is that what you're telling us? Like hop on a boat?
But here's the thing: I don't know I know more about the West Virginia monsters, but I'm not sure if they've made a degree. So I think that maybe I should start my own, how they sell prescriptions for emotional support animals. Maybe I should do that for West Virginia cryptozoology, since I'm a degree professional already, and go ahead and that's like a great. I'm talking about my genius small business idea right now, and I'm a little uncomfortable because this could make it big for me.
Let me write this down.
Yeah, I know. Nate's taking notes right now. He's starting venture capitalism firms, and he's emotional support cryptids. He scribbled down on a note. Wow, talk about a derail.
That's what I'm here for. That is what people book me for.
Thank you for bringing the chaos.
And I deliver every time.
So bring it on back now. You started as a world artist with Bethesda after interning at Wild Tangent, and you worked your way up the ladder there while over 14 years, which when you work at a company that long, like the last company I worked on, I was there for 11 years. It becomes like family there. You so much of your personality, your memories, and all of that becomes really wrapped up in there. But you never really forget where you started and what it was like those first years. What was it like walking in the door there and working on Fallout 3?
It was really exciting since, I'd always been a fan of the franchise, and just seeing that initial demo they made where it was like this little school area that was taken over by super mutants, and seeing that for the first time, and most people in the world hadn't seen it, at all at that point. It's just super exciting. I was like, hell yeah, let's build this. So I was all in.
And I think you'd said too that Fallout is what brought you to Bethesda. It was one of the reasons that you really wanted to be there.
No way. Like for some people it's Elder Scrolls, but for me it was 100% Fallout.
That's awesome. It had to be trippy too to go from the isometric style of Fallout 1 and 2 to fully realized 3D, and a complete transformation of the game with that.
Yeah, it was cool to see, and I was a little bit used to that since I'd worked on Metroid Prime 3, and that's kind of the same thing where they took those old games and transformed it. It was fun to see what they had done with Fallout, and I really enjoyed that. I'm sure there's purists out there who just like the originals more, and that's fine, but I really enjoyed them.
So what's that like going back and forth between like you're working on art design for something in a Fallout game, and then you're moving over to Skyrim, and then you move back? Like, is there like something that you need to rearrange your brain every time? It's like, okay, Bob Ross, got to channel some Bob Ross for this, and then the next
Happy
time
trees.
I got to channel. Like, what's that process like?
Yeah, it definitely takes getting used to switching those styles after like doing all these destroyed buildings for years. But
does it feel like a breath of fresh air? Are you like, oh yeah?
For some people, but for me, like I was fine just doing all the destroyed stuff. It was awesome to me.
Who hasn't mistaken a Draugr for a feral ghoul? I mean, it happens.
Yeah, there's parallels there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Here's a quiz for you. You can only save one of these that you've made: Little Lamplight, Paradise Falls, Tenpenny Tower, or The Underworld.
I think I'm going to go with Little Lamplight. That's one that's really special to me, and I spent a lot of time on that one, and even took the photos myself of the caves. There's like Luray Caverns is a cave nearby, and I took pictures there and built them into the cave kit for Little Lamplight.
That's awesome.
Really like
so you modeled that after Luray Caverns?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's cool. That's like the premier spot. I am from West Virginia, but I grew up in Virginia. So what that means is born in West Virginia, lived in Virginia until I was 18, then moved back to West Virginia. So Luray Caverns was like the premier spot for like third graders. That's like if you are going on the field trip, like that's one of the places you're going to go. You're going to get a big whole scoop of ice cream and go to Luray Caverns. So that's interesting. That's funny. We didn't cuss any time though. When we went in Luray Caverns, there wasn't a whole lot of cussing. But I know in Little Lamplight there may be.
Yeah, fair amount of it.
Who hasn't been sworn at by a small child before? Happens to the best of us. You served as lead artist on The Pit. What inspired the art design of that space?
I think it all comes from like the blast furnace and steel and all that. So the whole thing has this like fire theme, and that also kind of worked with like the timeline of that project because it was like 2 or 3 months. It was incredibly fast. So it's like, what can we do to make this as unique as possible? And spend time on just like those big set pieces like the blast furnace, and then just kind of recolor and change everything else beyond that to feel as different as we could. So you're really going to this new place.
Yeah, so much of there are certain DLCs that to me, that is one of them. And like even in New Vegas, the Sierra Madre, that whole world space almost feels like a completely different game. Like The Pit as its own could be its own game. It's such a different world space than where we were at in DC. Everything is very urban, and dark, and even the choices that you make there in terms of what to do with the baby. Oh my God, that's dark.
I think there's a lot more freedom in DLC. It's like, even though the Fallout games can let you do a lot, like on a DLC, you can do even more, like, aliens and all that.
Yes, Mothership Zeta.
Mm-hmm.
I love me some Mothership Zeta. Which brings us also to DLC. You were co-project lead and artist on Point Lookout. Which when you think about that one, the feel of that, when I first checked out Far Harbor with Fallout 4, it felt like I was going back to Point Pleasant. It had this same kind of dreary, like swampy atmosphere. It was oppressive and foggy. That DLC, Point Lookout, and the whole Calvert Mansion, your team put that together in 4 months, which is just insane.
That's the other nice thing about DLC is at that point you've spent so much time building that stuff that you know how to do it, and also the tools all work and are stable, so you can just do stuff a lot faster than you did the rest of the time, really. So that one was a lot of fun to work on. Learned a lot about how to like lay out the world too, which was useful for 76 for how you're like coming into Point Lookout and you see the mansion, and all those sightlines were controlled. We like mapped out exactly where you were going from where. I mean, obviously you can go whichever way you want, but they're sort of like the golden path.
Yeah, you feel.
I was always curious when 76 came out how much it would be like Point Lookout. Because Point Lookout has that like rural Maryland. I mean, you get outside of DC or whatever, and it's like any other rural place in Virginia or Maryland or wherever. Like you get that kind of vibe. And I was always curious, like it's like, okay, are we going to get that kind of vibe in 76? And some of it, yeah, but some of it, no. Like there wasn't. I think Point Lookout had like the crazy killer hillbillies, right, or something like that.
Yeah, which we like obviously
mutated. Things.
Moved far away from that for 76.
So that was my one worry, was that was going to happen, and then it didn't happen. I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, we had
somebody at the helm understands.
We had like a no hillbilly rule to try and make sure everything is like authentic as possible, because I think West Virginia is like really misrepresented in a lot of media, and I think it was a good opportunity to not do that. Like I'm still proud of Point Lookout, but it's kind of like this pulp horror kind of thing.
Yeah.
It has sort of comic booky fonts and stuff like that, and I still like that 76 has horror elements, but it's also just like part of it.
Yeah, I remember.
There's like a little bit of Lovecraftianness, just like Far Harbor. Like Point Lookout kind of has that kind of like, crazy mansion out there in the middle of the wilderness, and there's these people in it, and there's this like thing happening. I get that vibe at least. I may be entirely talking out of my butt at any point in time, but that's at least what I get.
Yeah, I mean, it has the whole like Krivbekna thing with like the ancient book, and it's totally inspired by that stuff.
Yeah, that is very Lovecraftian. I remember when we had Farrad on and we were interviewing him, that was one of the things that David asked him about. And he said that the team really tries to not misrepresent the locations that you guys create world spaces in. And that's a great example of, because Appalachia historically has really been misrepresented and painted with a really negative brush, even up until the 1960s and 1970s. In a lot of major media outlets, people have a particular impression of what it's like there, which is just not accurate at all.
And even though I'm not from West Virginia,
not only. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, even though I'm
there's
not
a little bit
from,
of a delay, so it's,
yeah,
you're okay.
It's okay. But I'm not from West Virginia, but I am from like rural Oregon, so I know how that is to have people have this stereotype of what your place is like.
Right. And it's interesting because not only is it like represented well, there are some like real deep cuts that like as like so I majored in geography and then had a minor in Appalachian studies in college, and so like I had that specialization in that thing, and there are some like Jesco White deep cuts, some like even like how you like made signs in certain towns and stuff, like off of almost like it's like you almost went out and took photos all of West Virginia, which I know that you did. That level of accuracy, like people, not just me, that's like, oh, I'm a super big Appalachian history nerd and Fallout nerd. Like people that just picked it up and played it are like, holy crap, that's where I live. That's cool that they have they have like the PRT in Morgantown, and they have all this like, oh, you can go see the baths in Berkeley. Like that's kind of stuff that I remember from growing up in these different areas. So that I think really resonated with the people around here more so than you would see people out elsewhere around these parts, around down here.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff to pull from. It's great to just go like as deep as possible to use that, because I mean, you have to build this whole world, so you don't have to make everything up. You can just, if you dig deep enough, there's all these interesting things, like the friggin' teapot. People are like, what? There's a teapot? Like, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it was funny. Ferret was talking to, we were talking to him about the lighthouse. And I guess there was an internal discussion like, we can't have a lighthouse. What? And you're like, it's right here. And he's like, okay, fine.
Yeah. Emil didn't believe me about that at first. He was like, this makes no sense. Why would there be a lighthouse? It's like, aha.
The, stepping aside for a second to some of the things that you've worked on developing, one of the interesting things we learned about the GDC talks that you did with Joel Burgess was the construction of modular kits, which really helped you build a lot of the games that we know and love, in which you create more unique assets that then level designers can go in and create something that looks a little more unique as opposed to cookie cutter. How did that approach come out? Was it just something that you're like, I'm bored with this space, we need to do this better?
It's like they always build stuff modularly at Bethesda, but Oblivion's a great game, don't get me wrong, but those dungeons all kind of look the same. So the goal the whole time was like, how can we make this as flexible as possible so all these spaces feel different? I think that got more and more complicated over time to let designers do even arbitrary walls and all the destruction in Fallout 4, where it started to get really pushed. And then I thought that was really helpful. It takes more time to build it that way, but it's a lot more interesting that way.
Yeah, but particularly when you think of older games, like I'm a big fan of the Dragon Age series. One of the things that I think is lampooned so much about Dragon Age 2 is when you're in the city, the entire, like every street looks exactly the same, to the point that the word that you guys used specifically was player fatigue. The point by which you're in a space and you're just kind of tired of being in that space. You kind of get worn out with it.
Yeah, I think the goal with every space that we made is basically like, what can we do to make this space different from anything else you've played? Sometimes it's something small, sometimes it's something big. Depends on how much time you have.
Fallout 4, talking about Fallout 4, was just a massive commercial success, huge. How did the art direction with that game change from the look and feel of Fallout 3, where Fallout 3, the palette was very green and drab, lots of grays and browns and greens and everything. Whereas Fallout 4 had such a different, more vibrant, almost futuristic Technicolor kind of feel to it.
Yeah, I think the goal was to make sure it felt like something completely different. And also back then on Fallout 3, we couldn't even do shadows. That wasn't a thing. So you kind of had to really rely on just like these incredibly noisy textures, that extreme color grading to get something that like looked nice. But we had the freedom to not do that. So we wanted to like diverge from that as much as possible. And the game that people saw that we shipped is not even as extreme as it was at first. Like at first, when we were doing early experiments and it was like just me and Eastvaughn working on the game, I was doing Diamond City, but it looked almost like TF2. We swung super far where it was like incredibly clean. We ended up, a little bit in the middle there, but that's kind of where we started. And we had those key, like the red and the blue from day one almost to make it super distinct.
That's interesting. It's like a kind of like a more poppy vibe with that. That would be a pretty cool art style for anything. We talked about this, I think, on a Fallout Hub. But was the obviously you think about Fallout 3, you think green. When you think about Fallout New Vegas, you think orange. Like, was that kind of like filtering because of like Breaking Bad and all of these like big shows coming out that had it was like filtering's kind of cool. Was that part of it, or was that just like the limitations of the engine or the art? Like, what was the vibe then? This is a vibe check. That's what the kids say. This is a vibe check.
Yeah, it was kind of both, because like I know Eastvaughn really liked that kind of extreme color grading, and there's some sci-fi movies that he liked that had that kind of look. But it was also the tech. Like the way you could color grade in Fallout 3 at that time was you could just take a color and wash it over the whole screen, and that was it. Later, on like Fallout 4, we could do what was called like a color lookup table. So basically, you could change any color to anything else to adjust. Like, I want the shadows to be more blue, not the whole thing, just the shadows. Shift them in that way. It's more like filmic color grading for real. So that let us do a lot more also.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you're known really with all of these games for the lighting that you do. You're kind of like the king of God rays. So the Fallout,
the king of God rays himself, gracing us with his presence,
the Phoenix and the king of God rays. How did the lighting system that you developed? How did that process occur? Was it something that you just have been experimenting with over time, or it was something that you consciously decided with the team? Okay, we need to create a new lighting system, and this is why.
Yeah, that was a big push on 76 that I fought for pretty hard and took a ton of time to do. But it was super important to me, and I think it makes a really big difference having like each room is reflecting its own actual room. Like if you go back and look at Fallout 4, look at any reflection, it's like some city street or something. You're like, I'm not even on a city street. Like, I'm in the woods. What's going on? So it makes things a lot more realistic, but also makes it look better, and it's faster to do it that way.
Yeah, the lighting in 76 after Wastelanders was just stunning. Particularly, you notice it in certain spaces. I've grown to have a real appreciation for the mire. When it's night and it's foggy and you've got the moon, and that entire space is just so beautiful with the light rays coming through the trees, and I love that space.
I'm glad you like that space. There's actually something kind of cool about that space that we didn't end up shipping because it didn't actually run. But all those little glowing mushrooms that are in there? At one point, I was going through the entire mire and making every single one of those glow. And so you had all this like yellow light on everything. Looked awesome, but turns out that's like thousands of lights all over the place. You like zoom out, you're like, okay, this is not going to run.
That would have been amazing. But you do have that kind of feel when you're down in the Sundew Groves. Like when you're in the Sundew Groves, where that area looks so otherworldly in comparison to everything else. Where I remember we were talking on Twitter that it's almost like it's Chernobyl-esque, where everything just has accelerated growth you have these weird, funky mutations. And then the sundew just kind of spits out all those orange pom-poms of, I don't know what the
Things
term
are like
for that is.
perfect for photos.
It is, yeah.
That's-
There's a lot of camp builders in our group that love building there just because when you're there, it keeps shooting those things out. So it just looks good to photograph.
And those things work really well with it. Another change we did with the lighting also is all of the trees and those sundews are behind the scenes. They're actually this giant cube that filters the light. So as you said it, like this is pink and it's like 50% transparent or something. So the light from the sun will come through and then become pink and then also bounce that around. So it sort of fills the forests and everything with more color.
That's awesome.
It's kind of exaggerated, like real life. It doesn't happen to that level, but I always liked the look of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love those spaces.
I would be curious, like if there was like a geotagging feature for screenshots or for the photo mode in Fallout 76, and like how many of them would be from the Sundrew Cove, because that a lot of the like photos that I see on Twitter or whatever are all from there with the spores and everything coming off the Sundrew. Like I'm curious what the spatial element of that would be.
Yeah, we have like heat maps. Yes, that you can see exactly where everyone goes, where they took their pictures and stuff like that. So it was where everybody died and from what. So all that stuff is awesome to look at. Where all the nukes are launched, which is kind of obvious where all those go.
Yeah. And it's changed over time too. I still miss there are things that I miss about year one that players that came to the game now won't experience, which is, in those early days of the game where you didn't know if you were going to meet friend or foe, or you're just wandering the wilderness, totally immersed in your character, and then you hear somebody eating potato chips. Like,
yeah, it was a different feeling back then.
It was completely different. And then you feel like you're constantly missing people, whether it's the Mistress of Mystery quest or you feel like you just missed people being alive, and there's such a forlorn emptiness that just we don't have in the game anymore now that we have PCs. But it was an interesting year, that year one.
Yeah, I think adding NPCs was a good thing, but it also I thought was kind of an interesting experiment, different tone.
Yeah, because when you think too about, I'd never played an online game at all, but I've been in love with Fallout and all of Bethesda's games, the Elder Scrolls series, Skyrim, ever since then. But when I thought about playing online, my first impression was, is this going to be like Call of Duty? And is a 12-year-old going to like say racial epithets at me? Is that what my experience is going to be? But I figured, what the hell? I'd try it out and go for it. And considering everything of what the game was, or maybe it didn't meet some people's expectations, I think there's for a large portion of people, it was such a sandbox that it garnered elements of the community to come together in ways that they never have before. In that and I remember Todd talking about it in E3, and it left a lasting impression on me, where he said that this is your opportunity to be an NPC, where we're giving you a world where you can tell your own stories. And I think a lot of people really took that to heart when you see all of these role-playing communities and machinimas and podcasts and all of this wacky stuff come up. And this wasn't a question that I thought of beforehand, but when you put a lot of work, because I'm in a creative field too, and sometimes you work on something that you put so much of yourself into, and it can be hard to listen to people just trash it when you feel good about it. I can only imagine how that must have felt for you guys in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty intense, I would say. It's like being the villains of the internet for a while. But at the same time, sort of used to it, because it's always been that way with Bethesda games to some extent, where even though it's like everyone's playing Skyrim and stuff, but then there's like this really vocal minority just yelling at the top of their lungs on the internet, this is the worst thing ever. And you're like, well, 20 million people disagree with you. So I don't
Right,
know.
and people get in
It's
their
tough, though.
mindset, and there's like a narrative that they make up. And it's the same thing for like like Sony games, or for Bungie with their games. It's like people get a narrative in their head, and it's like there's like essentially the character limit of a tweet that keeps on like recycling in their heads, and then people just recycle it. And so
Yeah,
it's like, oh, the
lazy
Bethesda
dev.
games have bugs, and it's like, okay, right, right. And so, and that narrative can change. Like, I mean, you can look at like, and I'm not trying to like throw shade, but like you can look at like Cyberpunk and how that like media storm happened, where it's like people really got an idea and then really started to like bring that out. It's not good. It's really not good for anybody. Like, nobody wins. There's no winner in that game of internet hate. There's no winner.
And it's sad too, because you guys, I mean, you clearly love Fallout, and you clearly love what you do. And it can be so hard in this day and age when in so many different fandoms and mediums, there are these vast echo chambers where it becomes almost impossible to kind of counter and say, well, you know what? Have you actually tried it? As opposed to just listen to someone else's opinion. Did you go in and experience it for yourself? Or did you put yourself in the mindset to even try and give it an opportunity?
It's tough to convince people of that. But all the people making these games and movies and everything, all those people are trying. No one is like, I'm going to be lazy and do a shitty job. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
That's super rare. Maybe some people, but definitely not most. That's not how it happens.
That would be some like Andy Kaufman making a video game. Like that would be some like out there super weird.
I feel like Sacha Baron Cohen, that could be his next thing. I'm going to make the worst video game of all time. With the No Clip documentary, which I love watching those, had talked about that Fallout 76 had really begun as a multiplayer concept for Fallout 4. That spun off and became 76, but it was more of a focus on PvP, way more than what we have now. And then it was almost like a Rust-style game. We never saw that build. What was it like to play that back then? Because I know a lot of the devs have talked about how much you guys enjoy being competitive, and even before the game launched, getting into PvP matches and stuff.
Yeah, it was definitely different, but it was also frustrating for people in a lot of ways. But I would do what I call asshole testing, where I would do that on purpose and be like, I'm going to trash your camp over and over just to see how it breaks and to see how that feels as a game. Because you kind of have to do that. You can't just be like, I'm going to play the perfect way and be nice. You can't do that. Like, if we did it that way, we probably would have shipped it that way, and people would have been annoyed in the same way once the actual people start playing. Yep. So it was very different.
Why Appalachia? Why did you guys pick West Virginia?
So I fought pretty hard for that one, and I think it's like the landscape and the variety of the things in it. It's just super interesting to me. To get like up on the mountains and have the forest and everything was a lot more compelling than like, hey, let's do yet another urban area with the surrounding suburbs and stuff like that. It was something new, and I think it fit the theme of what that kind of game was a little bit better also. As opposed to like if we did it in Pennsylvania, like that came up early on, but I think this worked better.
Right.
Yeah, West Virginia.
And the cities in Pennsylvania, I mean, you got Philly and Pittsburgh, and those are two really big cities where, like, I mean, Charleston, if you go there, it's like there was absolutely no sprawl because it's just mountains around it. So it's just like on a river. It's like, the maximum, it's like 10 streets of city, all, it's a very long city. We're a very long city, but it's not very big. There's still like, I mean, you can drive like 5 minutes and be in like complete wilderness. There's kind of that element to it where I don't know. There's not that much sprawl in West Virginia, at least from my perspective. I mean, you get up there towards the Panhandle in DC in that area, that could be a little different. But
yeah, I think that's a new, different feel for it.
Yeah, that Nate road trip is kind of famous for
I have questions.
For you getting out there and scouting locations and everything. What was that like? And before we get into this, because Dave is going to have questions, in your new venture, please, for the love of God, chronicle things. Because I think a lot of us would have loved for like a behind the scenes like road trip with Nate. Like you release it after the game so you don't spoil anything, but I think that would have been fascinating to see that process of going on location and scouting all of that.
Well, now I don't have to vet anything, so I can do whatever. But yeah, that trip was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it was also really hard to do, though, because everything is so spread out. So I had everything to the hour on be like, we have to do this tour and then drive to this place. Because otherwise you're not going to see anything. You're going to spend like 6 months doing it and still not see everything.
Right. So imagine I'm your mom, right? And I'm asking you about your vacation. I want to know. I want to know everything. Like, how do you plan that kind of trip? Like, where do you start? Do you start researching on the internet? Are you like, okay, these are some of the top spots, or like, oh, I heard from a friend about this?
Yeah, it was internet and books, because some of the stuff is not actually on the internet. So I had lots of like weird things to see in West Virginia, kind of books and stuff like that to find more stuff. And then I put it all into Google Earth and like had all these little pins and stuff to see then like what is then the ideal path to hit as much as possible and like this big circle to then come back eventually. That's how and you have to cut some stuff, but we saw as much as we could in the time that we had.
So how long did it take you, your tour, your grand tour? It's like you're imagine you're going up the like Pacific Coast Highway or something, you're hitting every wine. Like how long did that tour take you?
I think we only had for the main trip, it was only like 4 days, so it was very fast. Yeah. But I also took extra trips sort of throughout the years and even before we started on the game to go and visit various places. Hey, we're going to go skiing or something. Let's go to West Virginia to do it.
Were there any locations?
You kind of like intersperse that with different. Oh, sorry.
Oh, were there any locations that you wanted to be in the game that just didn't make the cut based on the way that you kind of reshaped things?
Yeah, like we weren't able to fit Wheeling in. It's also a schedule thing. Like we could have fit it in the map and found a way to do it, but it's also like, do we have time to do it? Can we do it justice? So that's one that I think we didn't have the time to be able to really pull that one off.
Right. I do have a report for you. Everyone loved what you did in West Virginia, except for the people that lived in Huntington and Wheeling. Everyone was irate. Everyone sent hate thoughts. They were like, where is Marshall? Where is Huntington? Where is the tri-state area? Everyone in Wheeling is like, the Panhandle, man. The Panhandle. What's the point?
Yeah, it's tough, but we, at the end of the day, had to be like, well, what are the urban places that we think we can fit? And worked with the map and the schedule. So as much as I would have liked to put it all in, we weren't able to do that. I definitely wanted to, but then they're like, well, you can't do everything in the whole state.
What's your personal favorite location?
I think I like the top of the world. Because even though that's like a blend of real places and made up, I like having that element of sort of luxury vacation stuff also, because that was another important thing to have, was all those different things of like lumber yards and coal mines and stuff, but also nice places that people go on vacation, like White Spring and all these things like that. I think it makes it feel more like a real place that way.
Yeah.
When I was playing that and you all were talking about NPCs coming back into the world, I was like, they gotta head to the top of the world because they have everything up there. They have all the stores, they have all the different, and it's just in a globe. They don't have to be out. They can just be in the little snow globe of people. It's going to be so wonderful.
I always thought of it as like a UFO or a thumbtack.
Yeah, a few times when I saw that, and then when I saw silo covers, I thought, is that a UFO? No. Is that a UFO? No. Oh. And I think eventually we made
So when you were going and visiting places, what do you think, you can't pick favorites, but what's the most like, I guess, like, what blew your expectations away of a place? Like, you obviously, it's like, oh, you can name a favorite, but what was like, I went to go see this, and my expectation really changed.
The coal mine tour in Beckley was really cool because it was really interesting hearing all the details firsthand from a miner of like how that stuff works and all the tales of like the what is it, the Widowmakers, the stumps that fall through the tops of mines and kill people. So,
Yeah.
lots of interesting details there.
Year one versus
and now I'm gonna give you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm gonna give you. You're here with the West Virginia, born and raised. I'm from if you know the Hatfields and McCoys, Devil Ants married a person named Levice Chafin, and that's if you go, you turn it both
Dave
ways.
is
on both
extremely
sides,
proud of his West Virginia
What's
heritage.
your least favorite part about? I'm a born and raised. Hell yeah! What did they say? Eat shit, Pitt. That's what they say here. What was your least favorite part about that trip? What was the thing that you were like, this is either really hokey or I feel uncomfortable?
I don't know if there was one that I disliked at all.
Was?
No, like everything was pretty awesome. I mean, some are certainly less eventful than others. Like if you go out to Cranberry Bog, it's like you're basically looking at grass. Like, but I'm still glad that we win because then you're like, look, pitcher plant, zoom in.
Right, and so I did one of my like what is it, like a senior thesis project was on the Cranberry Bog about whether or not. So it used to be a glacial formation, and it was whether or not flying squirrels, like the Virginia flying squirrel, like they have a team in Richmond that's like the baseball team. It's called like the Flying Squirrels or something like that. But they're mostly in Virginia now, and so they don't really live that much unless you're in like kind of in that mountainous area, like the Blue Ridge Mountains area of Virginia. But my whole research was around the Cranberry Bog, and so when I found out that there was like a whole area in Fallout 76 that I'd spent like a year of my life devoting research to, and it's going to be a gigantic video game area, I was like, are you kidding me? Did they make this for me? Were they stalking me the whole time and knew exactly what I wanted? It was wild because it's so small. When you actually go to the Cranberry Bog, it's like, okay, there's this little walkway and like there's a nice view in front where you get the mountains, you can see different stuff, but it's like if you look really closely, there's the pitcher plant, and there's just a few sundrew because the pitcher plants are actually invasive and are killing all the sundrew.
Yeah, I mean, that place was too cool to not sort of take a little bit of liberty with it and make it something more instead of just a location.
You'd made a throwaway comment in your Twitter feed that you were the Grafton monster in the trailer. What?
So trying to take trailers of AI in a game is like a total nightmare because you're like, no, don't walk that way. Come back in frame. So the trick is we use these special developer commands, and you can then become a creature. So on one hand, I'm pushing the camera forward, but on the other, I'm walking forward with the Grafton monster to get like the perfect shot. And then if it's bad, walk right back, get in place. Okay, take two.
That's awesome. I wish we could do that.
What's the cheat code for that? You know, now that we have you out of the Bethesda graphs, what's the cheat code?
Sure, all that stuff is culled from the real builds.
There's mods, Dave. Mods eventually will come.
That is something I always wanted to put in.
I'm on the PlayStation.
That would be amazing. Could you imagine, like, I would love to play as the Mothman. I would just mess with people. Just like peek out from behind their house or something.
Yeah, I had this idea of like putting a gun in the game that would let you then take over any creature. We never did it, obviously, but what if you're like spying on someone's camp as like a rad stag? Like, don't mind me.
That would be kind of awesome.
It's like a full, like you're talking about a full druid build, and I am so here for it. I am so here for it.
End game builds.
Yeah, there was also talk of like, what if you could become a Wendigo if you ate too many people?
These are great ideas.
I mean, we covered that on the podcast.
Let me tell you, if I'm Mr. Moneybags, if I'm like, Mr. making that money, I'm like, yeah, there you go. Put that on the table. That's good. Invest.
The Sickleman. Where did that come from? That is, I mean, that spawned like a whole arc in our story. And I think that's one of everyone's favorite Easter eggs. Everybody takes pictures there, and there's all kinds of threads and conjecture and
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed seeing all that stuff because Sickleman was this series of stories I did in like 5th grade. Because I would write all these like ghost and horror stories and stuff like that, and teachers are like, "What are you writing? This stuff is weird." And they like called my parents. They're like, "We're worried about it." But I stuck with it and kept making monsters, and so I just had to kind of put it in. At one point, that was like the first cabin that I ever put in the game too. But then I went back at one point and just added that.
Yeah, I love that it
Like,
changed from
let people guess.
the sickle man was here to is here. That was such a troll move.
Yeah, I just thought it would be funny one day. I was like, well, let's leave it open. Maybe it will be around.
I think I spent like a whole Saturday trying to like crack that code. And I spent a lot of time on that. I literally
Nate
pulled
just
out a
ruined
book.
your
It was
world.
called the Telltale. It's called the Telltale Lilac Bush. It's a horror story book from West Virginia that has a lot of story. And it I was reading about this one farmer that used a sickle that cut off the heads of people, and I was like, okay, if he's cutting off the heads of people, where was this? And it turns out it was on the Grafton River, and I was like, oh, it's on the Grafton River. Oh, does that mean it's really? So it's like the Grafton Monster's headless, and I imagine me with the pin boards, right? That's me. I'm like putting everything up, trying to figure out everything. So it's good. Now we have the real answer. I can put the books down. I can put the.
Suffice to say, you lived in Dave's head for a while.
I think 5th grade me would be very amused by this.
Can you imagine parent-teacher conferences with the Purkeypiles? Like, your son's writing stories about a serial killer, and then a little while, your son's doing projects on nuclear weapons and blast radiuses. We have some concerns.
Pretty much.
Hey, you're inspiring the next generation of kids with concerns.
Yeah, stick with it and make cool stuff.
One thing I wanted to mention here in chat, because we're winding down, don't forget to hit !Purkeypile, or sorry, !Purkey, to enter into our giveaway for Shia's art prints. We're going to have 2 of them to give away, and I'm going to be doing a drawing for those. Not exclamation point, it's a hashtag Purkey. My bad. Speaking of Easter eggs, from your late cat that was in the paintings of the developers' faces as the busts, your face is one of the busts that's in the game. That was kind of fun to figure out. Which one is your favorite Easter egg that you've dropped in?
Well, I think there's one that a lot of people don't know what it means still, and it's the Astro Panda at the top of Seneca Rocks. And
yes.
So that one is like a nickname that my wife and I have for our family, because when we first started dating, it was around Halloween, and she was like dressed as a panda and I was an astronaut, so we combined that.
That's awesome.
Then also, that's one that I changed over time, because then it has Rowan and Seneca under that, which is my daughter's name, and Seneca is named after Seneca Rocks.
You've broken Dave. Dave is broken now. Dave.
That's really sweet. That's really kind. I love that. That's so nice.
But there are also
you made up for the Sickleman stuff with that. I mean, that's just so nice. I can't not like you, you know?
There are whole Reddit threads going on about those words and if it ties into the Standing Stones and like that. And Nate's just sitting here back like, yeah, it's my family. That's awesome.
Yeah, you'll find messages like that every once in a while through the game. It'll be like, Danny was here or something like that. It's because we have individual letters, so you can just spell whatever you want, just kind of sneak it in the game. And that's my handwriting, by the way. So it's really weird to see these messages every once in a while be like, in my handwriting, but someone else wrote it.
That's awesome. Who is Marv?
So Marv was this guy in QA, would take that Fashnak mask, the one with like the long nose, and he would always wear that. But then he would take all these screenshots and just sort of sneak him into there. So it'd be like, find Marv in the picture. And he also even made the real mask once for like a Halloween party at the office. That was pretty awesome.
Did you do you now, or did you play in public worlds? It must have been a little surreal to like be in world with players and kind of observe them. Like wandering through this.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Everyone was super nice though. Like no one would know who I am. I was just running around and would dress up as Santa and give people free stuff. Just see what people are up to. Interesting seeing everyone enjoy it.
Well, it's funny. It's funny that you're talking about the masks, and it's like now it's like those masks are so involved in the game. They're also involved in the actual Fosnot in West Virginia. So now, when you go to some of these huts and see the masks from previous years, they have saved some of the masks that people made that are replicas of the Fallout 76 masks, and they're up on the shelves.
That's
So it's
awesome.
That's so great.
you know, life imitates art, art imitates life. Like it's crazy. That kind of stuff is absolutely wild to see.
Helvetia is so cool. I loved going to that place.
You know, it's interesting too. Places that become where a Fallout game is set, whether it's Fallout 4 or now Fallout 76, they become tourist destinations. Like players want to go there to see the same locations in game. And particularly with Helvetia, I don't think a lot of people know this, that town really struggles throughout the year, and really, really relies on tourism. Particularly last year with everything shut down. Most recently, I'd seen pictures online. Players got together and went around painting the houses in the town. When you see stuff like that, it's amazing how much the games bring people together or get them to appreciate things or go places. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to introduce people to it because, you know, I'd never heard of the place until I started really doing research. So I'm glad more people have heard of it now.
What are you most proud of with 76?
I think I would just broadly go with like the world. Like I just love the way everything's laid out and how much variety there is because it was really nice since we had so much stuff from Fallout 4 that you can spend a lot more time then doing stuff that's different instead of like, we need to do a house and a building. Be like, no, let's do more unique, extreme stuff. I don't think we could have done nearly as much if we didn't have that sort of basis to build on.
I think it's probably my favorite world. I mean, I'm like talking like
Did you know that Dave's from West Virginia?
like people don't know or already know this. But as far as like a design level, like it is like country theme park. Like it takes a lot of like what I liked about like Nuka World, where it's like here's the ride here, here's the ride here, and the way that map is presented with all those like there's no like realistic map. It's all like, oh, there's this little drawing over here of this thing. If I go over there, I might be able to find like a teapot or something like that. And then when you go, you're like, oh, okay, this, and so things start like connecting in your mind, and it's almost like you're sightseeing. Like you have this like basic map of where everything is, and you're at Disney World, and you're like, I want to go, ride the Nuka-Cola plant ride. Like that mindset. It's so much fun to play an open world game like that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the goal with it, and we spent so long on that map, but it was so important, I think, to how the game plays instead of just like the grid with the green, more typical Fallout style. Like that's one that I fought for. I always wanted to be like, you have a paper map.
Yeah, I love that map. So now, Just Purkey Games. You're striking out on your own as an independent game developer. Tell us about that decision and what you're going to be doing next, because we've been patiently waiting, and you were seriously trolling us with this announcement for the past week.
I figured I might as well have some fun with it.
I love how many people are like, "Oh, he's working on Starfield," and I'm like,
No,
he's quit his job.
It's like
he's going to
the
be
one thing it won't be.
Yeah.
It's not Fallout 5.
Yeah, so it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I guess it just got to that point where it's like I've made, I'd say, enough Bethesda games at this point that I wanted to try something new, and I knew if I didn't do it, I'd eventually just like regret it forever. So tools are awesome these days, and I thought it was a great time to do it. Like I haven't said exactly what I'm doing for the game that I'm building, but I'm going to be building it with like Unreal 5, and that engine is amazing, and it's just so powerful. Excited to see what I can build with that.
Yeah,
and they just came out with that, right? That's like pretty new for consumers, right?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's still early access, so I'm sure there will be rough edges and stuff, but I'm looking forward to seeing how they sort stuff out. But it's like perfect timing for me, really.
Do you want to say what genre the game could possibly be?
Well, I can say it's probably going to be a first-person game because I've just been doing those for so long, and I just love the immersiveness of first-person games. And I would say it's probably going to be horror adjacent. not a horror game, but like kind of the way 76 has like elements of that. So that's stuff that I've always liked. But also probably lots of interesting things to explore.
Be a little spooky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't.
So what are some? So we talked about Fallout a bunch, but what are some like games that have inspired you outside of that series that you're like, okay, like obviously you've made a decision to do the independent development. It's like, what stuff have you played? You're like, oh, that's a really great idea, or like, oh, that mechanic really inspired me.
The one I'd point to is Subnautica. Actually, like that, I would put even in like my top games of all time. I think that game is just absolutely amazing, and the way there's so much mystery in that game, and just the way everything is unveiled slowly over time, and like that they don't give you a map or anything. You just kind of have to like get a sense of the world and set up your own little markers for where things are. It's fascinating.
I'm playing the second one right now, and it's great. It's fantastic. I love that series.
I was waiting for my new computer to come before I started. It's like shipping soon.
Do you predominantly play on PC or console?
I'd say it's like a 50-50 for me. It's just really wherever the games are. I'm definitely not one or the other.
What do you think your legacy is with all of the work that you did with Bethesda?
Probably going to be Skyrim. Because I bet when I'm like 80 or 90, they'll be like, put out another version of Skyrim. Everyone's still playing it.
Skyrim is now going to be available for your wallet.
You know, you just like plug it into the back of your neck at that point.
Yeah, go right in VR.
Well, for art, I mean, that's the game that's famously known as like everywhere a painting. Like everywhere you look, it's a painting. So I mean, you can't pick a worse game, you know.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's been like 10 years now. I should probably go back and play it. I was maybe going to try it out in VR and see how that is.
VR is, yeah.
Especially now that VR is like in a better state, in my opinion. Like, don't have to put up little light boxes and things like that. You can just, it works wirelessly. So it's pretty cool.
I started replaying Skyrim recently, and it reminded me again how breathtakingly beautiful that world is. And it's just a joy to wander around in. Like that whole world space is just absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on.
Do you have an ethos or philosophy when it comes to the games that you've made and the games that you will make now on your own?
I think it's ultimately that I just try to make a game that I would like to play. And I think that's kind of how Bethesda games worked, period. Like, even though a lot of games are more like that now, even back then, it was not really like other games, and sort of kickstarted the whole open world thing. Because back then, people would be like, why would you do that? That's maybe pretty extreme. But those are what we wanted to play, and we tried as much as we could to make everything interesting in them. Even though it's very different from like the linear approach where everything is like hyper polished, like the amount of stuff we were able to do and the amount of time you can then spend in it, super interesting to me. So I think that's my goal going forward, is just make something that I think is interesting, and hopefully the players follow.
Yeah, we're on board with whatever you're going to be doing next, and
Nice.
we can't wait to see it. That was all of the questions that we had here for you. Is there anything you wanted to say? We've got a whole bunch of people here in chat who've been chatting it up and sharing some love for you.
Just thanks for playing all the games throughout the years, and hopefully I can keep making things that everybody still likes. So looking forward to it.
So before anybody goes, we have a drawing to do.
I will say this is the first time we've had a CEO to talk to.
That's a very good point.
Now.
Yeah, I thought about making my own title. It's like, should I be like Supreme Ruler of Just Purkey Games?
Grand Poobah.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, the first winner is Cincy Chili, CINCYCHILI. Cincy Chili, drop me a whisper with your information so I can get that for you. Now let's draw one last one. And the next one, El Jorge. Congratulations to El Jorge and Cincy Chili. I just whisper your addresses to me, name and address, and and you get some of Shia's original, absolutely amazing art. Congratulations to you both. And before we leave, we're going to pass this party on to somebody else. Fallout for Hope is going to be going on through tomorrow. We're at 15,943.75, so we've almost broken 16,000. Let's if we can do that by tomorrow, that's 160 trees, which would be pretty cool. We're gonna bring this party over to one of my favorite people. She's like the mother most of us wish we had, which is Ma Tater. She's absolutely lovely. Let's raid her now, and thank you very much for joining us here tonight with Nate, and have a wonderful rest of the holiday weekend, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Awkward moment before we raid. There we go.
It's time to be awkward. We'll do the outro song now.